Some killers disappear without a trace. In the Setagaya murders, the killer left everything but his name. December 30th, 2000. A quiet suburban neighborhood in Tokyo prepares for New Year's celebrations as darkness falls over the Miyazawa family home. Inside, Mikio, Yasuko, and their two young children, Ninina and Rei, go about their evening routines, unaware they are being watched. What happens next defies every convention of criminal behavior we've come to understand. The perpetrator didn't just commit murder and flee. He stayed. For nearly 10 hours, he wandered through the home, used the family computer, ate their food, drank their barley tea, and even took time to defecate without flushing the toilet. The killer slept on their couch, tried on their clothes, and treated their home as his own, all while the family lay dead mere feet away. This wasn't just an invasion that ended in tragedy. This was an occupation. 23 years have passed since that December night. Police have collected over 12,000 pieces of evidence, conducted more than 246,000 interviews, and amassed what should be an airtight case. They have the killer's DNA, his fingerprints, his blood type, even the distinctive Slazenger hat and hip-hop clothing he wore. They know the wound on his hand was still fresh, likely from breaking the glass to enter the home. They've identified the skateboarding shoes he owned, limited edition Korean boots with heel modifications. And yet, he remains a ghost. How does someone leave behind their entire biological and physical profile yet manage to remain completely invisible? This isn't just a question of who committed this crime. It's a fundamental challenge to our assumptions about modern forensic science itself. When we pull at the threads of this mystery, we find ourselves facing an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the more evidence we have, the further we seem from understanding the whole picture. The Setagaya case doesn't just ask us who this killer was. It forces us to question how someone could exist so completely outside the systems designed to identify them. You've likely never heard this family's story, but in Japan, the Miyazawa murders represent the greatest forensic paradox of the modern age. A case where science has provided all the answers except the one that matters most. As we examine what happened that night, one question will haunt every piece of evidence, every theory. How can someone leave everything behind, yet remain completely unknown? To understand the shadow that fell over the Miyazawa household, we must first understand the light that once filled it. The family of four lived in Setagaya, an affluent ward of Tokyo known for its safety and family-friendly atmosphere. The kind of neighborhood where doors remained unlocked well into the evening, where community festivals brought neighbors together throughout the year. Mikio Miyazawa, 44, worked as an industrial designer at a manufacturing company. Colleagues described him as meticulous, innovative, the type who saw solutions where others saw only problems. At home, he was known for his patience, particularly when helping his children with their studies or working on creative projects together. His latest passion had been upgrading the family computer and exploring the then-emerging world of the internet. His wife Yasuko, 41, balanced her responsibilities as a teacher at a local preschool with caring for their own children. Parents of her students remarked on her gentle nature and the way she seemed to intuitively understand each child's needs. The Miyazawa home reflected her touch, orderly but warm, practical yet filled with small, thoughtful details. Their daughter Ninina was just 8 years old, a bright student who had recently developed an interest in English. She collected stickers and kept them organized in albums, each page carefully arranged by theme. Her brother Rei, only 6, was known in the neighborhood for his infectious laugh and endless energy. He had just begun learning to play soccer and proudly wore his new jersey whenever possible. The December days leading up to their deaths followed the rhythm typical of many Japanese families preparing for Oshogatsu, the New Year holiday. In Japan, this isn't merely a night of celebration but a deeply significant cultural period of renewal, family gatherings, and traditional customs. Homes are thoroughly cleaned, debts settled, and special foods prepared. It's believed that how one enters the new year sets the tone for all that follows. December 30th, 2000, began as an ordinary Saturday. Mikio had spoken with his father by phone that afternoon, discussing their plans for the upcoming New Year celebrations. The family had gone shopping together, purchasing groceries and a few last-minute holiday items. Security cameras from various shops captured these final ordinary moments. Yasuko selecting fruit while Ninina helped keep an eye on her younger brother. After returning home, Mikio called his father again around 7 p.m. to confirm their New Year's Day visit. Nothing in his voice suggested concern or awareness of any threat. The family ate dinner together around 7:30 p.m. Neighbors would later recall seeing lights on in the Miyazawa home well into the evening, the soft blue glow of the television visible through curtains, the scene repeated in countless homes across the city. At 10:38 p.m., Ninina sent an email to her grandfather. The message was simple, cheerful, looking forward to seeing him soon and sharing news about a school project. This digital timestamp would later become a critical marker in the investigation timeline. It was the last known communication from the Miyazawa family. What happened in the hours that followed required investigators to rely on forensic reconstruction rather than witness testimony. No neighbors reported hearing unusual sounds from the Miyazawa home. No security cameras captured anyone approaching the property with malicious intent. The residential street, lined with similar two-story homes, fell into the quiet calm typical of suburban Tokyo at night. The weather that evening was cold but clear, the kind of winter night where sound travels easily through still air. Yet somehow, the horror unfolding inside the Miyazawa home remained contained within its walls, unnoticed by those living just meters away. This silence is the first anomaly in a case filled with them. 4 lives were extinguished without raising alarm. Even more disturbing is what careful examination of the crime scene would later reveal. The killer didn't immediately leave after the attacks. Instead, something unprecedented occurred, something that continues to confound criminologists and behavioral analysts 2 decades later. What compels someone to remain at the scene of their crime for hours? What mindset allows a person to move casually through a home where they've just extinguished 4 lives? The physical evidence left behind offers tantalizing clues about the killer's identity, but the behavioral evidence, the decision to stay, may reveal something even more crucial about their psychology. As the night of December 30th gave way to the early hours of December 31st, the Miyazawa family home took on a disturbing dual nature, part crime scene, part temporary residence for their killer. Outside, neighbors slept peacefully, unaware that just beyond their walls, someone was moving through rooms where the presence of death hung in the air, behaving as if they had all the time in the world. This wasn't a crime of opportunity that spiraled out of control. Neither was it the calculated execution of a professional. It existed in a troubling middle ground that defies easy categorization. A methodical killer who nonetheless left behind an encyclopedia of evidence, a violent intruder who afterward made himself at home. Something about this family or their home drew the perpetrator's attention. Something kept him there long after the violence ended. And something has protected his identity for over 2 decades, despite leaving behind what should have been more than enough to identify him within days. The morning of December 31st began like any other for Mikio's father. He had plans to speak with his son about their New Year celebration the following day. When repeated phone calls went unanswered, concern gradually transformed into something more urgent. By mid-afternoon, he made the decision to visit the home personally, a choice that would forever alter the final hours of the year for him and the entire community. Upon arrival, he found the house locked but noticed lights still on inside, unusual for the energy-conscious family. After receiving no response to his knocking, he used his spare key to enter. What he discovered inside transformed a father's concern into unimaginable horror. The scene he encountered was so devastating that even now, decades later, police reports redact certain details out of respect for the family and the psychological well-being of the public. The first officers to arrive documented a crime scene unlike any they had previously encountered. Not for its brutality alone, though that was substantial, but for the bizarre contradictions it presented. 4 lives had been taken with what appeared to be calculated efficiency, yet the killer had then behaved in ways that defied rational explanation. The initial evidence collection lasted over 40 hours straight. Crime scene technicians worked through New Year's Eve and into the holiday itself, meticulously documenting everything. The more they gathered, the more perplexing the case became. The point of entry was identified as a bathroom window on the 2nd floor. The glass had been carefully cut, then broken inward, a technique that suggested some preparation rather than an impulsive break-in. A neighbor's ladder, which had been stored beside their house, had been moved and positioned against the Miyazawa's wall, directly beneath this window. The killer had cut his hand during entry, leaving behind what would become one of many DNA samples. Bloodstain pattern analysis revealed the sequence of the attacks. Mikio was likely the first victim, confronted and overcome in the 2nd floor hallway outside the bathroom where the intruder had entered. Forensic evidence suggested he had attempted to fight back but was quickly overpowered. His wife Yasuko appears to have been attacked next, followed by the 2 children. The medical examiner's report indicated all 4 died between 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. What came next is where this case diverges from conventional criminal behavior. Rather than fleeing, the perpetrator made himself at home. In the kitchen, he prepared a snack of ice cream and barley tea. Fingerprints on the refrigerator door, ice cream container, and cup all belonged to the same individual, someone unknown to any database in Japan or internationally. In the bathroom, he defecated without flushing, another source of DNA that matched blood samples from throughout the house. The computer in Mikio's study showed activity until nearly 10 a.m. on December 31st, more than 10 hours after the family's deaths. The evidence inventory grew to unprecedented proportions. Among the items documented, a Slazenger skull cap left behind by the killer, a hip-hop style jacket with a distinctive design, skateboarding shoes, size 23.5 to 24.5 by Japanese measurement, later identified as Korean-made Air Hawkins brand, hand-shonen gloves, with the killer's blood on them, sand particles found on the killer's clothing, later analyzed to match specific beaches in the Korean peninsula, gym bag containing more blood evidence, waist pouch with unknown stains. Every item told part of a story, yet collectively they created more questions than answers. Forensic analysts determined the killer was male, likely in his late teens to mid-30s, approximately 170 to 180 centimeters tall. Blood analysis revealed type A, with genetic markers suggesting mixed Asian ancestry, possibly Korean or partially Korean. Fingerprints recovered from multiple surfaces throughout the home were pristine, some of the clearest crime scene prints investigators had ever collected. Yet despite the abundance of physical evidence, not a single database match emerged. The killer existed as a complete forensic profile, yet somehow remained a ghost, absent from criminal records, military files, employment databases, and immigration records. The juxtaposition was staggering. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police had compiled one of the most comprehensive forensic profiles of an unknown subject in criminal history, yet they couldn't attach a name to it. This wasn't a case of partial evidence or contaminated samples. This was the equivalent of having someone's entire biological signature and finding that it corresponded to no one. Behavioral analysts focused on another troubling aspect of the crime: the killer's apparent comfort in the presence of death. To remain in a home with 4 deceased victims for such an extended period suggested either profound psychological detachment or possibly some personal connection to the space itself. Had the killer been watching the family prior to that night? Did he have some knowledge of their routines, their home's layout? The Miyazawa house became temporarily uninhabitable during the investigation. Crime scene tape cordoned off not just a family home, but a neighborhood sense of security. Local residents installed new locks, added security systems, changed their daily routines. Parents began accompanying children to school. Community meetings centered on neighborhood watch programs. Yet as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, no suspect emerged. The killer, who had left behind everything except his identity, remained free, while an entire community remained prisoner to the fear he had created. The investigation expanded beyond Japan's borders. Interpol was engaged. DNA databases in South Korea, China, and the United States were searched. Military records were examined. The case received sustained media coverage throughout East Asia. Anonymous tips flooded dedicated police lines. And still, nothing. The evidence collected on December 31, 2000, filled an entire room in the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. 12,000 items, each meticulously catalogued, analyzed, and cross-referenced. 100 officers assigned specifically to this case. Nearly 250,000 interviews conducted. Yet the fundamental question remained unanswered. How could someone leave behind their entire biological and physical profile, yet exist nowhere in the systems designed to identify them? As days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the investigation into the Setagaya murders expanded into one of the most comprehensive in Japanese criminal history. Investigators pursued numerous avenues, each seeming to lead toward a solution only to dissolve into further questions. The theories that emerged generally fell into 4 distinct categories, each with compelling evidence yet decisive flaws. The first and most compelling theory centered on a foreign national connection, specifically ties to the Korean peninsula. This wasn't mere speculation but followed the physical evidence. The sand particles found on the killer's clothing and shoes matched specific coastal areas in South Korea. Forensic analysis of the skate shoes revealed they were manufactured by a Korean company called Air Hawkins, a brand with limited distribution primarily within Korea itself. The particular model wasn't sold in Japanese retail stores. Even more telling, the shoes had been modified with heel inserts, a customization practice more common in Korea than Japan at that time. The DNA profile added another layer to this theory. While the killer's blood type A is common throughout East Asia, certain genetic markers suggested mixed ancestry that potentially included Korean lineage. The distinctive clothing, a hip-hop style jacket and slazing cap, matched fashion trends more prevalent among certain youth subcultures in Korea than in Japan during that period. Investigators worked closely with Korean authorities, cross-referencing DNA against their criminal databases. They examined travel records, focusing on entries to Japan in the months preceding December 2000. Female officers conducted interviews in areas frequented by Korean nationals, showing sketches of the clothing items. Yet despite this international collaboration, no suspect materialized. The second theory focused on a potential military connection. The Setagaya ward lies within reasonable distance of several U.S. military installations, including Yokota Air Base. The killer's blood type A with specific genetic markers appears at higher rates among certain racial demographics that make up portions of the U.S. military presence in Japan. The precise cutting of the window glass suggested possible tactical training, while the methodical nature of the initial attack bore hallmarks of combat techniques. Military records were examined. Personnel on leave during the December 30th, 31 period were identified and, where possible, interviewed. Cooperation between Japanese authorities and U.S. military police was established, though governed by status of forces agreement protocols that sometimes limited access to personnel and records. Military DNA databases were consulted, though privacy laws and jurisdictional complications created obstacles. This avenue produced compelling circumstantial connections but no conclusive evidence linking any specific military personnel to the scene. The third theory proposed a personal connection to the Miyazawa family, suggesting this wasn't a random home invasion but targeted violence. Investigators scrutinized Mikio's work at the manufacturing firm, where he designed industrial equipment. Could he have encountered proprietary information that made him a target? Financial records were examined for evidence of debt or unusual transactions. Yasuko's work at the preschool was investigated for potential conflicts with parents or colleagues. Computer records showed Mikio had been active on early internet forums related to his design work and personal interests. The killer's use of the family computer after the murders prompted cybercrime specialists to analyze the machine. They discovered the killer had browsed websites but found no evidence he had accessed email accounts or attempted to send messages. This suggested he wasn't searching for specific information but simply using the computer casually. Another behavioral anomaly that defied explanation. The personal connection theory gained momentum when investigators discovered the family's home hadn't been randomly selected. Several houses on the street had similar layouts and security vulnerabilities, yet the perpetrator had targeted the Miyazawas specifically. Nothing of significant value had been stolen, undermining robbery as a primary motive. No evidence of sexual assault was found, eliminating another common motive. However, extensive investigation into the family's personal and professional lives revealed no conflict serious enough to provoke such violence. By all accounts, they were well regarded in their community with no significant enemies. The fourth theory, perhaps the most disturbing, was that the Miyazawas were victims of a completely random attack, selected by a killer who had no connection to them whatsoever. This theory gained credibility as other possibilities were systematically eliminated. The killer might have been wandering the neighborhood, noticed the ladder at the neighbor's house, and made an impulsive decision. The random nature would explain why no connection could be established between the perpetrator and victims. However, this theory struggled to explain the killer's extended stay in the home after the murders. Random killers typically flee immediately. They don't prepare snacks, use computers, or rest on couches. The level of comfort displayed suggested some familiarity with the environment or a psychological profile so distinct that conventional behavioral analysis couldn't account for it. As these theories developed, the investigation scale grew exponentially. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police dedicated an unprecedented number of resources to the case. A specialized task force of 246 investigators at its peak. Over 12,000 pieces of physical evidence catalogued. Approximately 246,000 interviews conducted. Regular DNA sweeps of men matching the physical profile. Annual public appeals for information on the anniversary. Rewards totaling millions of yen for credible leads. International cooperation expanded. The FBI provided behavioral analysis assistance. Korean authorities conducted parallel investigations within their borders. Interpol circulated the DNA profile and fingerprints globally. Japanese immigration records were cross-referenced against the timeline, focusing on individuals who had left Japan shortly after December 31, 2000, and never returned. One of the most promising leads emerged in 2015 when advanced DNA analysis techniques revealed new information about the killer's ancestry. The maternal haplogroup suggested lineage common in Eastern Europe, particularly among certain populations in Poland and surrounding regions. This unexpected connection led investigators to explore whether the perpetrator might have mixed Korean and Eastern European ancestry, a relatively uncommon genetic combination that could potentially narrow the search. Further forensic analysis of the clothing yielded another significant clue. The distinctive jacket contained a laundry tag with specific markings that matched a dry cleaning establishment in Seoul. Korean authorities located the business, but records from 2000 were no longer available. Still, the connection reinforced the theory of a Korean national or someone with significant ties to Korea. The case gained renewed attention in 2018 when similar forensic techniques identified the Golden State Killer in California after decades of investigation. Japanese authorities explored whether comparable methodology could be applied to the Setagaya case, examining family genealogy websites and DNA databases previously unavailable. The public's fascination with the case never waned. Annual television specials marked the anniversary, keeping the investigation active in the national consciousness. The grandfather who discovered the bodies became a poignant advocate for justice, appearing regularly at press conferences well into his advanced years, pleading for information. Yet despite these extraordinary efforts, the fundamental question remained: how could someone existing so completely in forensic terms remain completely absent from identification systems? This paradox transformed the Setagaya case from merely an unsolved murder into something more profound, a challenge to our faith in modern forensic science itself. Each theory contained elements of possibility, yet none fully explained the totality of evidence. The case existed at a troubling intersection, a killer methodical enough to commit the crimes without alerting neighbors, yet careless enough to leave abundant evidence. Someone with a psychological detachment to remain in the home for hours after the murders, yet who has never reoffended in a way that connected to this crime. The investigation continued to evolve, adapting to new technologies and forensic techniques. Yet with each passing year, the likelihood of resolution diminished. Witnesses' memories faded. Physical evidence, though preserved, yielded diminishing returns as analysis techniques reached their limits. The killer, if still alive, moved further from the person they were on that December night. And through it all, one question loomed largest. In a world where our biological and digital footprints are increasingly difficult to conceal, how has this person managed to remain a ghost? More than 2 decades have passed since the Setagaya murders shocked Japan. What remains is not merely an unsolved case but a profound contradiction. A killer who left everything behind yet somehow remains invisible. The passage of time has transformed this tragedy from a breaking news event into something more enduring. A case that challenges our fundamental assumptions about forensic science itself. The Miyazawa home no longer stands. After years of sitting empty, a constant reminder of that terrible night, it was eventually demolished. In its place now stands a small memorial garden, tended quietly by neighbors and visited occasionally by those who remember. Cherry blossoms fall each spring on ground where once a family built their lives. Time moves forward, even when justice cannot. Mikio's father, who discovered the bodies that New Year's Eve morning, dedicated the remainder of his life to seeking answers. Well into his 90s, he continued attending annual press conferences, his voice growing softer with age but no less determined. "I never imagined I would outlive my son by so many years," he told reporters on the 20th anniversary. "I stay alive because someone must remember them clearly. Someone must keep asking questions." He passed away in 2023, having never received the answers he sought. For the investigators who committed years to this case, the Setagaya murders represent a particularly haunting type of professional mystery, not one where evidence is scarce, but where abundance of evidence somehow yielded scarcity of answers. Many have retired, passing case files to younger detectives who weren't even born when the crimes occurred. In police headquarters, the evidence room dedicated to these murders has become something of a legend, a space where 12,000 items silently wait to fulfill their purpose. The impact on Japanese society extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. The case fundamentally altered the public's perception of safety in urban Tokyo. Home security system sales surged in the months following the murders. Community watch programs expanded. Parents became more protective of children. A culture already known for its safety became even more vigilant. The investigation itself prompted significant changes in Japanese forensic practices. International collaboration protocols were strengthened. DNA collection and storage systems were modernized. Cold case methodology was revamped. In this way, the Miyazawa family's tragedy created a legacy of improved investigative capacity that has helped solve other crimes, even as their own case remains open. Criminal psychology researchers have been particularly fascinated by the behavioral aspects of this case. The killer's decision to remain in the home for hours, using the computer, eating food, and apparently resting, represents a psychological profile that defies conventional categorization. Most killers experience an adrenaline surge that drives them to flee immediately. This perpetrator exhibited the opposite behavior, a chilling comfort in the presence of his victims. Some behavioral analysts believe this suggests a killer with a profound disconnection from normal human empathy. Others propose it indicates someone with a specific obsession related to the home itself rather than the family. The computer usage particularly interests researchers. Was the killer searching for something specific, or simply passing time? Did the extended stay represent a form of psychological gratification, or merely convenience? As technology has evolved, new efforts to solve the case have emerged. In 2015, advanced DNA phenotyping created a more detailed profile of the killer's likely appearance. In 2018, genetic genealogy techniques, similar to those that identified the Golden State Killer, were applied to the evidence. In 2020, artificial intelligence programs analyzed witness statements and evidence patterns, searching for connections human investigators might have missed. Most recently, in 2024, Japanese authorities announced the creation of a specialized task force combining veteran detectives with new forensic technologies specifically for this case. The DNA evidence, preserved meticulously for over 2 decades, is being reanalyzed using techniques that didn't exist when the crimes occurred. The killer's genetic profile is being compared against expanded international databases, including those from private DNA testing companies who have agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The central paradox remains unchanged. How can someone leave behind their entire biological signature yet match no record anywhere? Several possibilities have emerged over the years. The killer may have died shortly after the murders, before his DNA could be collected for any official purpose. He may have left Japan immediately, returning to a country with limited DNA collection practices or poor database integration with international systems. He could be living in isolation, having never had his DNA or fingerprints collected for employment, military service, or criminal processing. He might belong to a demographically specific subgroup whose biological markers are underrepresented in comparative databases. Each theory has merits and flaws. Death would explain the perpetrator's disappearance, but not why no family member has ever matched the partial DNA profile through familial searching. International flight explains the absence from Japanese databases, but not why international searches have yielded nothing. Isolation might explain the individual's absence from systems, but seems increasingly implausible in our interconnected world. The most disquieting possibility is that the killer has remained hidden in plain sight, perhaps even in the Setagaya ward itself. Someone who reads the anniversary newspaper articles, who walks past the memorial garden, who has constructed a life that exists parallel to but untouched by the investigation that should have identified him years ago. For the detectives who still carry the case files to their desks each morning, the Setagaya murders represent both a professional challenge and a moral obligation. This isn't just about solving a crime anymore, explained one detective who requested anonymity due to the ongoing investigation. It's about answering a question for a family and a community who have waited far too long. Every cold case deserves resolution, but this one, with so much evidence, feels particularly crucial to solve. The statute of limitations for murder in Japan was abolished in 2010, partly in response to cases like this one. There is no legal expiration date on justice for the Miyazawa family. As long as the evidence remains preserved and the case files open, the possibility of resolution exists. Yet we are left with the same fundamental question that has haunted this case from its earliest days. How can someone leave everything behind yet remain completely unknown? Perhaps the answer lies not in what we're seeing but in what we're failing to see. Some crucial connection or context that transforms the evidence from a collection of disparate items into a coherent narrative pointing to one specific individual. Perhaps it requires one person who recognizes something in the evidence that triggers a memory, who knows something they haven't yet shared. Or perhaps the Setagaya case will remain what it has become, a somber reminder that even in an age of unprecedented technological capacity to identify individuals, some mysteries persist. A reminder that for all our forensic advancement, human behavior can still confound our most sophisticated systems of identification and analysis. What remains certain is that somewhere, either in evidence already collected or in connections not yet made, the answer exists. 4 lives were taken that December night in 2000. A killer left behind everything except his name. And somewhere between these two realities lies a truth that has eluded discovery for over 20 years. For those who remember the Miyazawa family, For the investigators who have dedicated careers to this case, and for a community forever changed by what happened, one hope remains: that somewhere among the 12,000 pieces of evidence, or in the memory of someone watching this, lies the final piece that will at last bring answer to the question that has haunted this case for decades. If you have information about the Setagaya family murders, even details that might seem insignificant, please contact the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. After 23 years, it may be the smallest detail that finally brings resolution to one of criminal history's most perplexing cases.